Good morning. I am so thrilled to be here, even though I'm freezing. We don't get this beautiful snow that also chills you to the bone down in Florida, where I grew up, or Georgia, where I live now. My thin little southern blood is just begging me to, wrap a blanket around myself. One small correction, Roger, I know they threw you up here with a bio. I've been in the business since 2001, not 2011. And the only reason I say that is I am really excited that I'm celebrating 21 years in the business and 17 of those licensed just last week. Because what a great industry we are a part of. Do you agree with that? Yeah. I want to just take one point of privilege, even though I'm not the president, but I'm going to follow in her footsteps. First of all, give yourselves a pat on the back. We are going through this market change, right? We are dealing with, if you are a broker, your agents are a little freaked out and panicking. If you're an agent, maybe you're experiencing a little bit of that. We're going to talk about goal setting today. We're going to talk about why you shouldn't have a New Year's resolution, but we should set some really great goals. But more importantly, when you see your association staff over the next day or two, however long you're here, thank them. Appreciate them. Tell them how much you love coming to events like this, that they work hard to put on for you. Because here's what I'll tell you. We are not an easy breed to work for. We are demanding. We have unrealistic expectations. We complain that our clients do, but so do we. So thank your association staff. They would not do the job that they do if they didn't love doing it for you. So make sure that you thank them, because this is a lovely event. But now let's talk about this new year, new you. Why is that a great marketing plan, especially for diet companies, gyms, right? Why do they want you to think that you need to change? Because if you accept and acknowledge that you are okay the way you are, or that you don't need grand, lofty goals to be happy with yourself, they know that you'll spend money. They're going to take this new year, new you mentality all the way to the bank annually, and they're going to use you as their victims. They're going to either convince you that those little doubts you have in the back of your mind, that you're not quite as thin as you should be, that you're not in as good of shape that you could be, that maybe your hairline isn't all that it could be. They're going to prey on those little voices in the back of your head, or even worse, they're going to put those thoughts there for you. They're going to show you unrealistic expectations of what your body should look like and your clothes should look like. They're going to use those pesky little social media influencers to wheedle into your social media feed, whether it's by promising you prizes in contests that may or might not exist, or they're going to promise you results that only cost you $9.99 a month on an automatic plan with a 24-month contract, right? The other person who's going to prey on those thoughts and those fears and those voices in the back of your mind are the companies that sell things to you as a realtor and that sell products and services to your agents. Those calls that thankfully AT&T has started warning me when I have a telemarketer on the line, so I can just hit ignore. They are preying on the person who thinks their business isn't quite what it should be or could be, whose business isn't as good as the person who sits in the cubicle next to them, or just telling them that I'm going to give you 20 qualified leads a month for a 35% referral fee. Why do we need to be new? Why do we need to focus on changing instead of growing? Or becoming better instead of just transforming? Why don't we get the opportunity to decide what works for us? And this is where we have a difference between resolutions and goals. So, how many of you have ever made a New Year's resolution? Come on, be honest. Put those hands up. How many of you have ever failed at a New Year's resolution? That's right. Everybody has. Now, why do resolutions fail? Well, inherently, they set us up for failure instead of success. And it's based on the marketing messages that we receive. So, for example, they're often vague. I want to save money. Well, how much money? By what date? How often can you afford to put money aside? Or they're extreme, right? I watched a documentary on on the way that they process meat in this country, so you know what? I'm going vegan tomorrow. And they're unstructured. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to fit in a size 4, but no plan to do it. So they set us up for failure, first of all. Secondly, they're based on the fact that our society has become one of unrealistic imperfection. We look at social media and we do what a British journalist that I love named Emma Gannon refers to as compare and despair. When you scroll through, especially photo-based social media such as Instagram or video-based such as TikTok, we see people doing things and looking a certain way and flashing around expensive vacations and clothing and handbags and shoes, and we want that. But we want it not with a plan to get there. We want it, and we look at ourselves and say, they're better than me. Why do they have what I don't have? Why can't I have that? But instead of setting goals and putting a plan in place that we can measure and we can see what our progress is, instead we despair. We're built on celebrating impossible imperfection. And finally, a resolution by its name doesn't allow us to celebrate progress. And it doesn't allow us to celebrate failure, which is an integral part of success. Would you agree? It doesn't allow us to say, look at this milestone that I've hit. Instead, a resolution is a firm decision to do or not do something. You either lose the weight or you don't. You either get the vacation to the Maldives or you don't. There's no progress. It requires you to be resolute and either celebrate when you get there or despair when you inevitably do not. But let's look at the most common example, and that is our culture of gym memberships. Now, look at these statistics. We can then compare them to other things, other resolutions that we set, or other goals that we set without doing goal setting properly. So, for example, 12% of all new gym memberships happen in the first week of January. That means that we got tipsy on champagne on New Year's Eve, and we vowed to ourselves and the people at the bar or on the cruise ship, or we clinked glasses with our friends and said, we're gonna lose weight next year. I'm gonna be in that bikini on the beach. And then we go and join the gym. And they know that this is what we're doing, and they know that 80% of us won't make it past the 5-month mark. In fact, there's a reason, there's 2 holidays that you might not know about in January. January 12th is Stick to Your Resolutions Day. They know, they see it coming, right? They're like, you've almost made it 2 weeks. That's more than you did last year. But then January 17th is Ditch the New Year's Resolution Day. I mean, we made it 2 weeks, right? That's more than last year. Progress. But why do we ditch? It's because we don't have a goal. We don't schedule in our calendars, in our mindset, we don't schedule how we're going to make it happen. So when we don't see progress in that first 17 days, now tell me, how many of you can save enough money for a vacation in the Maldives in 17 days? Or how many of you are going to get to your ultimate goal weight in 17 days? In fact, you're probably going to gain weight before you lose it. And then you're going to lose it. And then if you follow science, which, you know our country's track record on following science, right? And I'm not even talking about vaccines, I'm just saying in general. But you'll lose weight, right? But then if you continue to work out, what happens, people in the audience who work out? You'll gain it again even if you keep getting smaller, because muscle weighs more than fat. So the good news is you're getting there. The bad news is you don't see it because you look on the scale and you say, it's not working, I quit, right? 50% never go regularly at all. So they sign up, that's step 1. And they go once or twice, that's not habit forming, right? And the majority will continue to pay because they wanted to save money, right? So they started giving a gym money. And they said, well, you could save even more if you put it on if you sign a contract. And you say, oh, okay, I'll take that 50-cent savings per month. And then they say, and you know what? You can save even more if you just let us take it out of your bank account every month. You don't even have to think about it. You don't have to write us a check. You don't have to do the draft yourself. We'll just take it. And then they keep taking it even though it's long forgotten. It's now July, you don't care about the bathing suit anymore, you didn't go to the Maldives, maybe you did a little staycation and maybe you came to Grand Rapids, it's lovely here. But you didn't need the bikini, so you kind of quit and So how do we make it better? Because we can, not just for ourselves, we can make it better for our agents. If you're a broker, or you're a team leader, or you're a trainer, or you're a mentor, you can make it better for them. You can also make it better for your fellow volunteers. Those Leadership Academy folks, I got to spend some time with them yesterday. They did deserve that second round of applause. They are a fantastic group. You can help them with their goal setting. Maybe it's their volunteer leadership goals. Talk to them. Find out, where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself? What's your goal? And what's your plan to get there? Because a goal without a plan is just a wish, and we don't have fairy godmothers. As much as I would love someone to dress me every day, we don't have someone who comes in that pumpkin coach driven by the white horses and shows up and makes our wishes come true. We have to work for them, and the way that we work for them is by setting SMART goals. Now, you may have heard this before. You may have seen a graphic similar to this talking about SMART: measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. But here's the thing. If you saw this and you've heard this before, but you didn't embrace it, you didn't absorb it, you didn't put it into practice, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, that's okay, because I know you won't be honest with me anyway, but some of you have heard this before and not done it. So we're going to review what it looks like to put together a plan to turn a resolution or a wish into a goal that you can set into motion so that you, for your own personal goals and your professional goals and your volunteer goals, as well as those of your friends and your colleagues and the people that you teach and you mentor, they can put it into practice too. So first, goals need to be specific. We can't just say, think back to that second slide with the resolutions on it, right? Lose weight, save money. Get rich, drive a fast car, call my mom more. There's no plan there. They're not specific. They're very vague. They're a good jumping off point if you're saying, what are my big dreams? And you write those things down, but what's the specific goal? Lose weight, how much? Save money, how much do you want? Buy a new car, what car? What does it cost? Have you researched it? Are you going to pay outright? What's the monthly payment? Can you afford it? But we don't think of those things when we're speaking our resolutions. That's how we approach goals. So it's the 5 W's. What do I want? Why is it important to me? Verbalize this. Write it down when you're setting a goal. If a goal is something that you truly want to achieve, then you need to not just think that you know why, you need to be able to express it. Because the great thing about goals is you can get there the more you know why you want it. And you need to write them down, and then you need to share your goals with someone. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the Leadership Academy yesterday, and they had some phenomenal answers for why we share goals. It's not just for accountability. It's because once you share it with someone, you've inspired your brain to action. It's moved from the back of your mind, literally and figuratively, into the frontal cortex, where now you have spoken it, you have shared it, you are more likely to follow through with the next step, right? It also makes you a little bit more afraid of ultimate failure, because you've told people what you want to do, and so now, if you don't do it, they're going to be like, what happened, right? We need them to be measurable. We need to be able to track our progress, and that doesn't just mean put a deadline on the end. That means set milestones for yourself. I want to sell 100 houses this year. Well, how am I going to get there? Can anyone just say I want to sell 100 houses and then have success and do nothing else in between? No, because we need a plan. What marketing do I have? What's my budget? How many phone calls do I need to make a day? How many appointments do I need to set per week? But how many realtors do you know who have set attainable goals, but they haven't been specific about how they're going to do it, and then they felt like they failed? We need them to be attainable. We need to know how important it is. You need to prioritize your goals if you have more than one. Make sure that you are being very honest with yourself about how attainable that goal is. If you're a brand new realtor and you say, I want to sell 100 houses this year, that might be a little less attainable than if you're 3 or 4 years in the business, you've built up a database, you're doing some farming, your friends and family know that you're a realtor. How attainable is it? And if you're not sure, seek feedback. If it's a health goal, seek feedback from your doctor, maybe the person at the gym, your trainer. But seek feedback so that you can not only help to tweak this plan, but you can also figure out, what's the time period that I need to get this done realistically? Is it relevant to your long-term goals? Is it relevant? Are any of the goals connected to each other? Is now the right time? Is it the right time to start every single goal in January? No, you may need to stagger, A, so you don't get overwhelmed, and B, so that you're starting working on them at the appropriate time. And finally, create those deadlines. Put them in your calendar. Schedule time that you're going to check in with yourself on a regular basis to measure progress. And then allow yourself to celebrate when you hit those milestones. Don't make yourself wait till the very end to celebrate. Because as you hit those milestones that you've set along the way, there's truth to the cliche that the joy is not in the destination. The joy is in the journey. So celebrate the journey and enjoy it. If you've ever been on a weight loss journey, and I know I keep coming back to that one, but I feel like it's easy for a lot of us to relate to. If you've ever been on that journey, it's easier when you can celebrate the milestones, the small victories, right? Celebrate the battles and then winning the war. That's why certain companies like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig are so successful, not just successful in bringing in your money and getting you to sign up, but they have a success rate with the people who follow the plan. You go in to weigh yourself every week with a counselor so that they can explain to you how that trajectory of your weight loss looks from a progress perspective. So that you're not at home standing on your scale going, but I've worked so hard. They help to explain what that should look like in a healthy way so that their participants ultimately have more success. And when you do these things, when you set these goals, when you have these milestones in place and you're celebrating progress, that sets you up for success in a way that resolutions set you up for failure. And remember that not everybody wants to do what it takes to be successful. This is one of my favorite slides, and I showed it yesterday too. Not everyone wants to do what it takes to be successful. And if sometimes once they see what it takes, they don't want to do it. There's a reason we have about a 2.6-year average for the length of time the average realtor stays in the business. They don't want to do what it takes to be successful. They don't want to set goals and have plans. They don't want to make the phone calls. Those agents that get in when the market is great, how many of you know somebody, maybe it's a client of yours, who got in the business sometime in between summer of 2020? I know you guys in Michigan had it a little rougher with the essential versus non-essential. I know that was a little rougher for you than it was for us. But around summer of 2020, sometime between then and last summer, they got in the business because the business was booming. And it looks like easy money. How many of you have had a client who said, I've been thinking about getting my real estate license because I really love going to open houses. And I say, well, you can do that without a license. You can just go. That's why they're called open, right? And then I also think to myself, God, I hate going to open houses. Have at it, right? But once they find out what it truly takes, that you have to spend money to make money, you have to do marketing, you have to get a lot of doors, literally and figuratively, slammed in your face. Once they find out what it takes to be successful, they often decide it's not for them. But if they're one of your agents or someone in your office, and you see that they're struggling, you could help them to make a better plan. You could help them to find success, even in a crazy market with 7% interest rates and, no houses to sell anyway, so why does it matter? But I want to talk about failure because I think it's important. We're often told that failure is the enemy of success. If you don't succeed, you failed, right? But what if we shift that mindset? What if we agree that failure is an essential ingredient to success? Think about some of the biggest success stories of all time, right? Babe Ruth struck out 1,330 times, but he's not remembered for that. He's remembered for the 714 home runs, right? But that's almost half of how many times he struck out. But what if he'd quit? What if he'd said, I've struck out 5 times now. Ugh, I quit. Bill Gates' first companies failed. Horrible financial problems. In the ground. Just cover them up. Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times with prototypes for the electric light. Aren't we glad he didn't give up? We should learn to embrace failure as a necessary learning experience on our path to success. I told the Leadership Academy yesterday that I found out last week that I have a bib to run the Boston Marathon. It's in less than 11 weeks. I am neither fast nor a good runner, so I'm running for charity, right? I'm not one of those people who can qualify. But the charity runners all found out they got a bib on Thanksgiving week. So here we are 2 months later, and they called last week and said, hey, you got one. Do you still want to run? Of course I do. You still want to raise $10,000? Of course I do. Right? You do know that if you don't raise it, we're just going to charge your credit card? Of course I do. But my training now, I have had a lot of failures in running. I'm not fast. I've failed to qualify for a good corral in other races. I've failed to break a 10-minute mile. I'm a slow runner. I've had running failures, but I've learned from them. I train better and more consistently than I did when I was first starting out because I didn't start running until I was 41 years old. And I realized that here's a little known secret. Your metabolism changes. Why don't they tell us that? So I started running when I was 41 and I didn't know what I was doing. I just said, oh my gosh, I have to do something because all of a sudden everything I eat goes, in places it didn't go before. And I did a lot of things wrong. I got horrible shin splints. I couldn't figure out why. I was out of commission for a couple of months. I got a high ankle sprain, something I was doing wrong with form. I realized I was wearing the wrong shoes. There were a lot of things that could have made me say, I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. I give up. But I learned from them. I learned to become a better, if still slow, runner. And now, aren't I glad I stuck with it? Because I'm getting to run one of the most prestigious courses in the world. Now, granted, not because I qualified, but I'm still getting to do it. And that's a bucket list item for me that I didn't think I could ever achieve. And B, I would never have had the confidence to even put my name in the hat if I hadn't kept going every time I had a stumbling block or a failure or an injury. Because here's what I want to challenge you to believe. I want you to change your mindset. Success is not the opposite of failure. Failure is not the enemy of success. Resilience is the opposite of failure. It's okay to fail as long as we're resilient. As long as we pick ourselves back up, learn from the thing that happened, and try again, maybe try differently, maybe try better. But resiliency is the opposite of failure. Resiliency means we don't give up. We reassess, we reevaluate, and we try again. But while we're on the topic of giving up, let's talk about this, because here's another slight semantics change that I want you to make. If we're thinking about setting goals better, I want you to think about quitting and giving up being two different things. We've built a culture around quitting being a bad word. Quitters never win, winners never quit, right? But when is it okay to quit? Because I would argue that there's a difference between quitting, which is intentional. Quitting is with intent. Quitting is because you've learned something about yourself or the process that makes it a better idea to stop than to keep going. So think about this. Think about the kid who realizes that they just don't enjoy sports the way they used to, and they want to pursue other things. That's a child who quits, versus the child who says, everyone's better than me. I quit. That's giving up. Do you see the difference? What about the agent who says, well, I've tried this marketing campaign for 12 months now. I stayed within my budget. I did the follow-ups. I had calls to action. I'm not getting the return on the investment that I thought that I would. So I think I'm going to quit farming that area, and I'm going to move my money into something where I'm going to see a better return. Versus the agent who sends one just listed postcard, gets no phone calls, does no follow-up, and decides that farming and mailers don't work. Everyone has lied to me. I'm giving up. There's a difference. Speaking of the Boston Marathon, I have a very good friend who actually did get a bib on both merit and speed, which I'll remind you, I have neither. But she qualified, and for her age group at the time, she was under 40, and so several years ago, the qualifying time, the maximum time that she would need to have run an official BQ course, Boston qualifying course, was to do her 26.2 miles in under 3 hours and 20 minutes. Now, for context, that's my half marathon time. Yep. So she qualified. And then here's the thing about Boston. You don't just get a bib if you have a qualifying time. Now you apply for a bib, and there's a bit of a lottery system that happens. And about 22 to 25% of people who actually have a qualifying time will get an invitation from the Boston Athletic Association to come and run the Boston Marathon. So to be a qualifier is incredibly difficult, right? And I remember the day that she found out she had a bib because she posted on social media. She was so excited. Can you imagine this as a runner? And she's nearing the age that her body may start to break down because she has been a lifelong runner. So we're talking like we're looking at maybe some knee replacements, a little bit of hip situation going on. So she thinks to herself, I'm in the prime. This is a great opportunity for me. I can't wait. I'm going to train. So she did, and she got there, and she went across that starting line, and around mile 11, something bad started to happen. And around mile 13, the pain was getting worse. Around mile 15, it was excruciating. And at mile 17, just short of the 17-mile marker, she knew that she had to quit. She had to stop. Her body was telling her, we're not doing this anymore. Like, you're going to cause serious injury to us, and I don't think we want that, so we're going to say, let's stop now. And I remember that social media post. It was full of shame and full of regret and self-blame because she had to quit. And she even said in the post, I hate this because I'm not a quitter. But here's the happy ending to that story. She qualified again a couple years later, and she finished it that time. I'm glad that she quit in the moment so she didn't cause serious injury, but she didn't give up. Because a less resilient person, a less emotionally intelligent person might have said, well, I give up. I'm not going to reach my goal. I'm not going to have that dream ending where I get that medal with the unicorn on it that everybody wants. So she quit because she had to quit in the moment, but she didn't give up. And that's a huge difference. In the months that followed that first time she ran it, I had lunch with her a couple of times, and we talked about it when I finally felt like I could broach the subject, because, you know, something like that, it's a little uncomfortable. You don't want to say, so let's talk about your failure, huh? That must have sucked. But when she was ready to talk about it, we talked about it, and she said to me, I was so down on myself for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I started thinking about, okay, where did the pain occur? When did it occur? Was my pace too fast? Had I not warmed up well? So what was she doing? She was learning from that experience. And she said once she shifted her mindset and she started thinking about it that way, she knew that she needed to do what she had done, but she wasn't going to give up the dream, and she was going to try again. So she was learning from it, but also celebrating progress. Now, there was a 2018 study that was done. The original study, they coined this term factfulness. And the original study was done to evaluate the level of optimism versus pessimism and a general feeling of happiness in its participants. And the two groups were one group of people who only consumed their news from one news source, or the other group that consumed their news from multiple major sources. And they found, as you can imagine, that the one with the variation in the projection of the news stories, those people were ultimately happier and more optimistic, because they were hearing the same stories from different points of view. Because let's be real, there's no news agency in the world that's unbiased, right? So, but the happier, seemingly more well-rounded, more optimistic people who were filled with more sense of hope were the ones who got their news stories from more than one source. And then there were the unhappy people over here, and I'm sorry, I'm totally making you into the unhappy people. They only watched one station for their news, and they felt generally more pessimistic and a sense of having no hope for the future. They took this study and this concept of factfulness, and they moved it into another study about goal setting. And they found that you are less likely to give up. You display more sense of resilience and optimism when you celebrate those little milestones. Part of that planning, when we set goals, no matter how big or small they are, maybe you have a teeny tiny little goal, and you know that you can hit it in the next 3 months. That's great. Set a couple milestones. Give yourself a little pat on the back. Do a little celebration. Buy yourself that cocktail or that nice purse you've been eyeing, whatever that is. But it found that when you celebrate milestones, instead of waiting to celebrate at the very, very end, you're more hopeful, more resilient, more positive, and you have a greater chance of success. That's good news, right? It's a focus on long-term progress as a source of mental peace, because it gives you a sense that you're inching toward your goal, instead of I'm stagnant until I reach the end, right? And it recognized that it's unhealthy not to make progress. And when you lose hope, you increase your chances of failure. But when you have hope and you celebrate progress, you increase the probability of success. Now, I want to go back really quickly. I mentioned in the beginning, instead of focusing on change, focusing on what you want to become. There's a more gradual sense of becoming than there is in change, right? Change makes us think of black and white, right? Or right or wrong, or it happened or it didn't. A sense of becoming or a sense of transformation is a different feeling. It's a gradual blooming. It's celebrating those little steps of progress. There's a great podcast I was listening to, Tim Ferriss, who is an author and a podcaster. He had a gentleman named Rich Roll, not Rick Roll, like, but a gentleman named Rich Roll, and they were talking about the importance of goal setting and the importance of having a process, having a plan. And he said we shouldn't focus on change because change feels abrupt. We should focus on becoming or transformation. Now, those of you who know me, I know there's some familiar faces in the room. We're friends. We've either met several times in person or we're friends on social media. But if you follow my Instagram, you're going to notice a distinct lack of real estate, mainly because I love to bake. And so my Instagram is just baked goods. So don't go there if you're hungry. But I started thinking about this concept of transformation. And then I started thinking about what happens when we bake. Now, it happens a little bit in cooking, but we're going to focus on baking because in baking, there's a science and an art, right? And there's a phenomenon in the baking process where the amino acids and the sugars get together and they do a little dance, make a little love, get down tonight, yeah? Okay. It's called the Maillard reaction. And you may not have ever heard of this phenomenon, but I guarantee you've seen it. It's what turns that lump of white, pasty, unattractive bread dough into a beautiful, crusty loaf of sourdough, right? It stays nice and soft on the inside, and it gets that nice crispy crust on the outside. Or if you're not really into savory, maybe you like pie, it's what makes that granulated sugar on the top of raw pie dough. When you put it in the oven, it gets nice and crispy and flaky, and the layers of the pie crust separate, or the layers of the puff pastry separate, right? And they are flaky and delicious, and they melt in your mouth because of all that wonderful butter. It's like food porn, right? All that butter reacts with the yeast and the sugars. It's also what happens if you're a coffee drinker. That's what turns coffee beans that are disgusting and inedible, and I tell you this from experience because I went to a coffee roasting facility once and we were taking a tour, and I said, "Oh, can you eat them like this?" And the guy said, "Sure, you can." And I took that as, "Sure you can," and I stuck one in my mouth and it was horrible. But those raw coffee beans, the Maillard reaction is what turns them into the thing that we grind up and roast and pour hot water over and make coffee. And different stages of that reaction is what causes different color on the roast: dark roast, medium roast, blonde roast. And it's what turns that marshmallow into that umami deliciousness that you stick between 2 graham crackers with a piece of chocolate, and we call it a s'more. Because we want some more of them. But this reaction, this transformation, I use this as an example because there's become this slew of shows now on social media. You know, baking has become quite a thing, especially with the pandemic when everybody started making sourdough. But really, those baking competition shows have been around for a decade or a little more, especially on the Food Network. And there's a new version of baking reality show now. You may have seen one of them. It's called Nailed It, right? So they bring in amateurs and they give them ridiculously short amounts of time to do a task, to copy what it took a professional hours and hours and hours to create, right? And the entertainment portion of this is they fail. And it looks funny and it looks ridiculous and we all laugh. But here's what they don't tell us. How did it taste? Because baking is a science and an art. You really only need the science to go right for it to taste good, right? Like, you may not make that beautiful sourdough art, you know, that people are putting on Instagram throughout the pandemic, where they carve into the top of the dough and it makes all these beautiful designs. You may not be able to do that your first time out, but if you follow the instructions, you might be able to bake a darn tasty loaf of bread. That's the science. The art can come later. So your transformation, transforming first your resolutions into actionable goals, but then the transformation that you undergo as you work through the plan to get to the goal, it doesn't have to be pretty. And probably won't be. If your goals are big enough and important enough to you, the way that you get there may not be pretty. The art doesn't matter. The art can come later. The science, having the plan, setting milestones, sticking to it, that's the part that matters. And that's the part that's ultimately the most rewarding. Now, usually this is right about the time where I start to wrap up this talk, but I've been doing a good bit of research lately on something that I think is important for us to be not just thinking about for ourselves, but making sure that we're keeping an eye on agents around us, I started thinking about this a lot during the pandemic because with the pandemic, one positive thing that came out of the pandemic, I think, is a little bit of the removal of the stigma around conversations about mental health. And as we're setting goals, lofty goals for ourselves, right? Business goals, we've got our business plan. Hopefully we all did that in fourth quarter, right? Like good, obedient realtors, we're supposed to do that. We're small business owners, we run our business like a business. When you're setting these goals and when you're making these plans, I need for you to commit to leave time for yourself. Don't commit your entire calendar every day to working toward your goals. Unless, of course, one of those goals is a little more downtime or a little more time unplugged or a little more focus on you. Because what we have in our industry is a very serious problem with burnout. And I would argue that that's responsible for a large percentage of those who do leave the business. It's not that they don't know how to run a business, although we do have those folks, right? We have the ones who just want to go to the open houses. They sell a couple houses to their friends and family. They make some money. Then they realize it's hard. They don't want to do it anymore. They didn't get any guidance. We say bye. But burnout is a very real problem. We have created a culture among consumers that we have given them permission to expect from us what we don't expect from any other professional in this country, except maybe emergency services, because yes, they are on call 24/7. But my CPA doesn't answer my phone calls after 5 o'clock at night. I mean, I'm lucky if I call at 4:59 if they answer, right? Or 4:30 on a Friday. I mean, geez. When I went through a divorce, my divorce attorney wasn't, agreeing to meet with me on a Saturday afternoon because that's what worked for my schedule. My bankers aren't open. I can't hold a closing on a Sunday because I feel like it. We've given consumers permission to treat us as less than professionals. And then we don't reap the rewards of doing more business and making more money. We reap the disadvantage of getting burned out. So I just want to talk about that as we wrap up. I want you to know some signs of burnout because here's what the other thing I'm going to tell you. At the end of 2019, this was even before the pandemic, right? That was our kind of March 2020 present. At the end of 2019, I was ready to quit, but quit like give up. Like I'm done. I don't want to be in this business anymore. I had sold more houses and made more money than I had in any other year in my career, and I was miserable. I hated every minute of it. I started getting migraines, which I'd never had before. I wasn't taking the best care that I could of my clients, and thank goodness my husband is my business partner, so there was someone there to step in and pick up the slack, but I was finding it very difficult to care. And what I didn't realize was I was burned out. I did 35 speaking engagements that year. I was on the campaign team for the candidate for president of NAR the year before, so we started his planning year that year. I sold more houses and made more money, and I wasn't happy about it. So if you have seen this in some of your agents or your colleagues or your friends, or maybe you're feeling a little bit, here's some of the signs, because this is the other scary thing. In 2019, before the pandemic, the American College of Psychiatry put clinical burnout in the DSM-5 as a diagnosable malady. They're acknowledging that it is a mental health crisis in our country. And I would argue that realtors are prime for suffering from it. So, feeling cynical about everyone and everything. If you are a normally optimistic person or you find yourself pretty even-keeled and you've found that you are more negative than usual, you're more cynical than usual, acknowledge that. Don't ignore that feeling. If you become apathetic about things, I didn't care. I didn't care if I was late meeting a client. I didn't really care if I was late going to closing. It's not that I didn't want that consumer to get great service. And like I said, my husband was picking up the slack. But I found that I was experiencing apathy that I'd never had before. Things that were once very easy became difficult or overwhelming. And I'm not just saying tasks that are difficult anyway. I'm saying like feeling overwhelmed by the thought of getting out of bed in the morning. If you're noticing similarities to clinical depression, it's because there are. Burnout is often misdiagnosed as clinical depression or diagnosed along with clinical depression. Physical symptoms, there was that migraine I was getting. I didn't know what it was the first time. I thought I had an aneurysm or a brain tumor, you know, when you go on WebMD and you're squinting because your head hurts so bad and the blue light makes it worse, but you're like, I gotta figure out what this is. Don't go on WebMD. It's like don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry, right? Don't go on WebMD with a stuffy nose because you'll be convinced that you're dying. But it can weaken your immune system. It can give you aches and pains that are unexplainable. Chronic headaches. If you're finding that you're sick more often, it might not be that we're just still experiencing the effects of a pandemic. It might be that you're burned out. If you isolate yourself, you cancel plans, or you say no to things that you would have normally said yes to, feeling a huge loss of energy. So if any of this sounds familiar, listen to your body. Because there are some things that we can do to reverse the effects, and it's not just taking 6 months off and going to Tahiti and laying in a hut on the beach. There are some things that you can do to reverse these signs before they get too bad or to avoid them. And here's what they are. Prioritize sleep. Get enough sleep, or at least try to on a regular basis. I'm a horrible insomniac. I try to make sure that my sleep is sacred time, because if I can actually fall asleep, I need to stay there. Put a moratorium on that blue light. Now, scientists used to say that you just shouldn't look at your screen, whether it was your television, your iPad, your laptop, your computer, your phone, your Kindle, etc., within 30 minutes of going to bed. And now they're also saying that it's unhealthy for your brain within 30 minutes of waking up. And I say it's unhealthy for your mental state to wake up and immediately open up Facebook, right? So give yourself 20 or 30 minutes in the morning and 20 or 30 minutes at night without that screen shining in your face. And don't just say to me, well, I've got those blue light blockers. Just put the phone down. It's okay. It'll all be there tomorrow. Embrace vitamin D. Now, here's the other thing I learned after I turned 40. Not just did my metabolism change, but I learned that seasonal affective disorder is real. I also didn't realize that that was something that could change, like my metabolism, with my age. I love a day like I've had here. I mean, we don't get snow, right? So even though I'm freezing when I go outside, it's so pretty. But if I had this for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, I know. You're like, tell me about it. You're preaching to the literal choir. But think about ways to get vitamin D into your diet, whether your doctor recommends a supplement or you eat more foods that are rich in vitamin D, or I'll tell you what, I love that light that you can get for like 20 bucks on Amazon that you can sit in front of for 15 or 20 minutes a day. It doesn't give you suntan, so don't get hopeful about that. But it bathes you in vitamin D and it mimics sunlight. And studies have found that it does a tremendous amount of good. Focus on physical activity, do something, anything. Figure something out, especially if you're feeling burned out. Your instinct is to kind of hibernate and go into a cocoon and not do anything. Make yourself get up and just walk around your house, walk around the block. Consider food sensitivity. They have found links between depression and other mental health disorders, and burnout is one of them, between eating foods that your body isn't loving too much. Moderation with alcohol, I know. Not while you're here, don't worry. I mean, I get it, I'm a realtor. Like, when you go home, like on a normal basis. And listen to the messages that your body sends you. Because I want to quote really quickly a study that was done by UC Berkeley, which stated that they surveyed hundreds of people who considered themselves to be both personally and financially successful. And what they found in those studies is that 85% of those people attributed their success to emotional intelligence, moral intelligence, and body intelligence, meaning they listened when their body was sending them messages that something wasn't right. So the most successful people tune into those signals. And of course, if you have physical symptoms, please see your doctor. I am not one. I would love to play one on TV, but Shonda Rhimes hasn't called. So, but don't take my advice. See your doctor if you really have problems that you are recognizing in yourself. All right, so how do we wrap up today? What are our success strategies for going forward and achieving those goals, turning those resolutions into actionable plans? Well, first of all, write them down. Remember, we're going to write them down and we're going to share them with someone that we trust. You're going to set milestones so that you can track the progress. Or if you're helping someone else do this, you're going to help them to set those milestones and put them in their calendar. And if you are an accountability partner, put them in your calendar too, so you can check in with them and encourage them, right? We are going to allow for celebration along the way. Find a way to reward yourself. Moderation in all things. So if you're chasing down that fitness goal or that weight loss goal, it's okay to reward yourself, right? Just like it's okay to reward yourself if you've gotten 25% of the way there on your sales goals for the year. You don't have to wait until the end of the year and celebrate one time because that's what your broker says, or that's what your broker does, right? Visualize what success looks like for you. Break it down into little pieces, little parts. And I would love it if you would commit to making time to do something that brings you joy every day. That one joy-felt activity so that you're making time for yourself, you're actively fighting against burnout, and allowing yourself some stillness. How many of you are excited about the rest of your day here today? How many of you are excited about 2023? I wish you all the greatest success this year. I know that you are going to have a great year as Michigan Realtors. I'm so excited that I got to be a part of this with you. I want to give you, in case you want to keep in touch with me, I love to keep in touch with you. I do a monthly newsletter just to agents and brokers. It doesn't have my open houses in it. It doesn't have my listings. It's recommended reading, articles, podcasts, etc. And if you'd like to sign up for that, here is the link to do so. And again, thank you so much. You've been wonderful, and have a fantastic rest of the year.